Cruise secrets. Tipping on cruises. What's fair versus foolish? Picture this. You're on the last day of your dream cruise, feeling relaxed and happy, when suddenly you're hit with a $15 per day gratuity charge you completely forgot about. Or worse, you're standing at the guest services desk trying to figure out why your cabin steward seems distant, only to realize you accidentally removed all your automatic tips on day one. I've seen both scenarios play out, and trust me, neither one makes for a great vacation memory. Cruise tipping is one of those topics that causes more stress than it should. Some passengers overtip out of guilt, others undertip out of confusion, and a surprising number think they can skip it entirely because it's all included. Well, it's not. And today we're going to break down exactly what's fair, what's foolish, and what's going to make your cruise experience so much better. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're covering the stuff other cruise channels won't tell you straight.
The reality of automatic gratuities.
Let's start with the elephant in the room, those automatic daily gratuities that show up on your bill, whether you remember them or not. Most major cruise lines charge between $13 to $16 per person per day, and here's what most people don't realize. This money doesn't just disappear into some corporate black hole. Your daily gratuity gets split among the crew members who work directly with passengers. Your cabin steward gets a chunk, your dining room server gets a piece, the assistant server gets some, and even the behind-the-scenes crew and housekeeping and food prep get their share. It's basically a pooled tip system that ensures everyone who makes your cruise possible gets compensated fairly. Now, I've heard passengers say, well, I'll just remove the automatic tips and hand out cash myself. That sounds noble, but here's the problem. You're only going to see maybe 20% of the people who actually serve you during your week at sea. What about the guy who cleans the buffet stations at 2 a.m.? The person who restocks your towels when you're not around? The prep cook who makes sure your dining room meals are ready on time? When you remove automatic gratuities, those folks get nothing, and they're working just as hard as the crew members you do see. I learned this lesson the hard way on my third cruise. I thought I was being generous by removing the auto tips and handing out $20 bills to my cabin steward and waiters. But halfway through the cruise, I noticed service was inconsistent. My room wasn't getting cleaned as thoroughly, and my dining requests were taking longer. It wasn't until I talked to a crew member I'd become friendly with that I understood. By opting out of the automatic system, I'd accidentally stiffed half the team that was supposed to take care of me.
When the automatic amount makes sense.
Here's the truth most cruise veterans won't admit. The standard automatic gratuity is actually pretty fair for average service. If your cabin steward shows up daily, keeps your room clean, stocks your towels, and is generally pleasant, that's worth the $5 to $6 per day that goes to them from your auto tips. If your dining room server remembers your drink preferences, handles special requests without attitude, and keeps your table running smoothly, the portion they receive is reasonable. The automatic system works best when you're getting solid, professional service across the board. And let's be honest, most cruise crew members are excellent at their jobs. They're trained to anticipate your needs, work incredibly long hours, and deal with thousands of passengers who all think they're the most important person on the ship. But here's where it gets tricky. What if service is exceptional? What if your cabin steward goes above and beyond, bringing you extra pillows without being asked? Or your server remembers that you're celebrating an anniversary and arranges something special? That's when you supplement the automatic tips with cash. I remember a 7-day Caribbean cruise where our dining room server, Miguel, was absolutely phenomenal. He remembered that my wife was gluten-free before we even reminded him each night, always had our drinks ready when we sat down, and even helped us get last-minute reservations at the specialty restaurant. On the last night, I handed him an extra $50 in cash on top of the automatic gratuities. His face lit up like we'd just made his month, and honestly, he'd made our week so much better that it felt like the right thing to do. The cash versus automatic debate. This is where cruise tipping gets controversial. Some experienced cruisers swear by removing automatic gratuities and tipping in cash instead. Their argument? Cash ensures the money goes directly to the person who earned it, with no middlemen or pooling systems. There's some merit to this approach, especially if you want to reward exceptional service or if you've had issues with specific crew members. Cash tips are immediate, personal, and there's no question about where the money ends up. Plus, if you're dealing with multiple currencies or want to tip based on actual performance rather than a fixed daily rate, cash gives you that flexibility. But here's what the cash-only crowd often overlooks. Removing automatic gratuities affects way more people than just your cabin steward and dining server. When you opt out of the system, you're not just making a statement about tipping preferences, you're potentially impacting the income of crew members you never interact with directly. The compromise that works for many experienced cruisers? Keep the automatic gratuities in place, then add cash tips for exceptional service. This way, everyone in the service chain gets something, but you can still recognize. Specialty dining and bar tipping. Now let's talk about the areas where cruise tipping gets really confusing. Specialty restaurants and bars. Most cruise lines automatically add an 18% gratuity to specialty dining bills and bar tabs. But passengers often don't realize this and end up double tipping. Always check your receipt before adding an extra tip. If you see service charge or gratuity already included, you're done. That 18% is going to your server or bartender. Adding more is generous, but not expected. That said, there are exceptions. If you're at the same bar every night and the bartender starts making your drink as soon as they see you coming, or if your specialty restaurant server goes way beyond the normal level of service, an extra few dollars in cash is a nice gesture. But don't feel obligated. I've seen passengers leave $20 tips on $40 bar tabs because they didn't realize the gratuity was already included. That's a 68% tip on top of the automatic 18%, which is just throwing money away. Be generous, but be smart about it. When to adjust your tips? This is the part most people are afraid to talk about. What do you do when service is genuinely poor? The automatic gratuity system assumes everyone deserves the standard amount. But what if your cabin steward consistently shows up late, forgets your requests, or is just unpleasant to deal with? You have options, but use them carefully. Most cruise lines allow you to adjust automatic gratuities at the guest services desk, either up or down. If you're going to reduce someone's tip, do it for legitimate service issues, not because you're trying to save money. And be specific about why. My cabin steward was consistently unprofessional is very different from, I don't think I should have to tip. Before you make any adjustments, try talking to the crew member directly or their supervisor. Sometimes, service issues are the result of miscommunication, language barriers, or circumstances beyond their control. I once had a cabin steward who seemed to be ignoring our room until day 4 when I discovered he'd been told by his supervisor that we were checking out early and didn't need daily service. One conversation fixed the entire problem. But if you've tried to resolve issues and service remains poor, don't feel guilty about adjusting gratuities accordingly. Just remember that these jobs are incredibly demanding. Crew members are working long contracts away from their families, and a bad day doesn't necessarily mean bad service overall. The suite and luxury cabin factor. If you're staying in a suite or higher category cabin, tipping expectations change significantly. Suite guests often have dedicated concierge service, priority dining reservations, and more personalized attention from crew members. With that elevated service comes the expectation of elevated tipping. Many suite guests increase their automatic gratuities by 50 to 100%, or they supplement with substantial cash tips. If your suite attendant is doing your laundry, arranging special requests, or providing concierge-level service, the standard $6 per day isn't really sufficient. The same applies to specialty services. If you're using the ship's laundry service regularly, getting frequent room service, or taking advantage of priority reservations and special perks, factor that into your tipping budget. Shore excursion and service tipping. Here's where cruise tipping extends beyond the ship itself. Shore excursion guides, especially on smaller, more personalized tours, often rely on tips as a significant part of their income. Unlike onboard crew, these folks usually aren't covered by any automatic systems. For group shore excursions, $2 to $5 per person is typical for the guide, and maybe another $1 or $2 for the driver if there's separate transportation. For private or small group tours, 10 to 15% of the tour cost is more appropriate, especially if the guide provided exceptional service or local insights that made your experience special. I remember a fantastic day in Cozumel where our guide, Carlos, took us to spots that weren't on the regular tourist path and spent extra time helping us find the perfect gifts for our kids back home. We ended up tipping him $40 for a $200 tour, and it felt completely justified, given how much he'd enhanced our day.
The psychology behind fair tipping. Here's something most cruise passengers don't think about: the psychological impact of tipping on both sides of the equation. For crew members, tips aren't just extra money. They're recognition that their work matters and that passengers appreciate their efforts. For passengers, appropriate tipping often leads to better service. Not because crew members are holding service hostage, but because they naturally put more effort into taking care of people who treat them well. This isn't about buying better service. It's about acknowledging that hospitality is a two-way street. When you tip fairly and treat crew members with respect, you're contributing to a positive environment that makes everyone's cruise better. Conversely, passengers who are known as poor tippers or who treat crew members poorly often find that service becomes more perfunctory. It's not vindictive, it's human nature. If you're dealing with hundreds of passengers and you have limited time and energy, you're going to focus on the ones who make your job pleasant and rewarding. Regional and cultural considerations. Different cruise lines and itineraries can have varying tipping expectations based on cultural norms and regional practices. European cruise lines often have different gratuity structures than American ones, and some include all gratuities in the cruise fare up front. On river cruises, particularly in Europe, tipping practices can be quite different from ocean cruising. Many river cruise lines recommend a total gratuity amount for the entire crew at the end of the cruise, rather than daily individual tips. If you're cruising on international lines or in regions where you're unfamiliar with local customs, don't be afraid to ask guest services for guidance. They'd rather help you understand expectations than have you accidentally undertip or create awkward situations. The hidden costs of getting it wrong. Here's what nobody talks about. Getting cruise tipping wrong doesn't just affect your wallet, it can genuinely impact your entire vacation experience. I've watched passengers create unnecessary drama by removing all automatic tips on day 2, then spending the rest of their cruise complaining about lukewarm service. Meanwhile, other passengers stress themselves out by carrying around envelopes of cash, trying to calculate the perfect tip for every interaction. The sweet spot is understanding that cruise tipping isn't a test you can fail. It's just part of the vacation math. Budget for it up front, adjust when necessary, and don't overthink it. Your cabin steward isn't keeping a scorecard, and your dining server isn't going to remember exactly how much you tipped 6 months from now. What they will remember is whether you were pleasant to work with and treated them with basic respect. Special situations nobody warns you about. Let me share a few scenarios that always catch first-time cruisers off guard. If you're traveling with kids who are ordering room service constantly, that delivery person is making multiple trips to your cabin daily. A few extra dollars for their trouble isn't required, but it's appreciated and often results in faster service. If you're celebrating something special, anniversary, birthday, honeymoon, and you mention it to your dining server or cabin steward, they'll often go out of their way to make it memorable. Maybe towel animals get more elaborate, or your server coordinates with the kitchen for a special dessert. When crew members make your celebration better, acknowledge it with an appropriate tip. And here's one that stumps even experienced cruisers. What about crew members who provide exceptional service but aren't typically tipped? I'm talking about the guest services representative who spends an hour helping you sort out a billing issue, or the shore excursion staff member who goes above and beyond to accommodate a special request. In these cases, a written compliment to their supervisor often means more than cash, because positive feedback directly impacts their performance reviews and future opportunities. The bottom line on fair versus foolish. After dozens of cruises and countless conversations with both passengers and crew members, here's what I've learned. Fair tipping on cruises isn't complicated if you approach it with common sense and basic respect for the people working to make your vacation special. Fair means recognizing that cruise crew members work incredibly hard for relatively low base wages, often spending months away from their families. Fair means understanding that automatic gratuities exist for good reasons and that opting out affects more people than you might realize. Fair means supplementing standard tips when service is exceptional and addressing problems constructively before reducing anyone's income. Foolish means trying to game the system to save a few dollars. Foolish means undertipping excellent service because you think gratuities should be truly optional. Foolish means overtipping out of guilt or social pressure,
when service doesn't warrant it. The cruise industry runs on hospitality, and hospitality works best when there's mutual respect between guests and crew. Your tips are part of that equation, but they're not the whole story. Treat people well, tip appropriately, and you'll find that your cruise experience becomes richer in ways that go far beyond the money you spend. Remember, you're not just buying a vacation when you cruise. You're entering into a temporary community where your actions affect others and their actions affect you. Make your contribution a positive one, and you'll be amazed at how much better your time at sea becomes. If this helped clear up some of the confusion around cruise tipping, give it a like and subscribe for more honest cruise advice. And let me know in the comments, what's been your experience with tipping on cruises? Have you had service that went above and beyond, or situations where you weren't sure what was appropriate? Share your stories because we can all learn from each other's experiences. Safe travels, and remember, a little generosity and common sense go a long way, whether you're at sea or anywhere else.